Hey, November 1st. On November 1st, we're going to have a special Veterans Day podcast. I just wanted to let everybody know that. So we're going to have some different people talk about their experiences in the military. So hope you check us out November 1st, and it's for Veterans Day. Thank you. Hello and welcome to another edition of History After Hours. My name is Kevin Pumphrey, and with me is
Ron Franklin.
And with us also is
Brooks Lee.
And this is season 3, episode 9, October 25th, 2017.
Fantastic.
How's everybody doing out there? So we're gonna jump through several subjects. I think we're gonna go through some stuff. We had a couple students email us, I guess you could say, and ask us some questions. So we're going to start off with this. Montana Kramer asked us about Catalonia's Declaration of Independence or threat thereof. I will go to our correspondent, the European world history guru, Mr. Ron Franklin. Tell us about this situation.
Okay, so the situation in Catalonia is interesting because they have had, well, let's start off, make sure that people know where this is. Like, this is a region in Spain, and they've been part of the Spanish nation for centuries. Going all the way back to medieval times, they had a fair amount of autonomy, and they've enjoyed that. They've considered themselves a separate group of people, but they've joined in with a larger national sort of spirit, just out of a sense of unity and security, basically. But they've enjoyed that autonomy. So going back and forth through different parts of their history, they've enjoyed more independence, or fair independence than recently. What we've seen happen as of late is that there's been a lot of talk from the Spanish government in Madrid to crack down on the Catalonian sort of self-rule aspect. And it really boils down to finances and taxes more than anything else, is what they pretty much have talked about. So they had a referendum in Catalonia a couple of weeks ago, and they voted to basically think about breaking away from Spain because they feel like they're being pressured. They don't feel like their rights are being protected. Their autonomy that the government has promoted to them for more than 100 years is under threat. And so they have a separate culture, they have a separate language, they have a separate diet. It's just a different region inside Spain. And they are now considering, because Spain is trying to crack down on them and trying to demand more unification, fall in line, pay your taxes. It's a wealthy region, which makes sense why Spain might want to get them under control. But the more you squeeze on them, the more they're willing to try to fight back. And so they had this vote, which Spain declared as illegal, and they told them not to do it. Well, they did anyway. And a lot of people got hurt because the Spanish authorities had sent out the police forces. You're allowed to crack down on folks, shut down the vote. The vote will not happen. And come to find out, it happened anyway, in spite of all that violence. So now there's bad blood on top of just the regular problems that they already were facing. People are angry. And so it's very possible that we could see some type of, if they don't calm down, which doesn't look like they're doing it right now, both sides are just sort of amping up the rhetoric, we could see a civil war in Spain before this is all said and done. And the Catalonians are seeking, they're talking more and more about full independence from Spain. If other nations in the EU sort of agree or recognize them as an independent, then that kind of helps them along their way. If the rest of Europe stands against them, then that might temper them down a little bit. So we'll see. Like, what was her specific question, or does she have?
Well, she was wondering, she kind of compared it to the American colonies when we declared independence from England. So are they more or less justified than the American colonies?
Less probably, but they have some talking points that they need to get in place, and they have been allowed to be independent, which is what we were pretty much doing for the colonies. So I see that connection, but and we were talking about this a while ago. It's more like when Mexico tried to crack down on Texas as a fairly autonomous region, which led up to Texas Revolution, and then them eventually joining in with the United States. Yeah. It's more similar to that. You're actually, whereas in the English colonies in the Americas, you have thousands of miles of separation. You've got a distant king who's never going to be able to visit that land. You've got the taxation without representation issues, and none of that really fits into this story. So it does revolve around taxation and fiscal responsibility and who is paying for what. But from the Catalonians' perspective, I think part of what they are demanding is that they want to continue to control themselves more like a state, and that's what's been allowed for most of this time. And they want to keep their taxes within inside their own region to support their own people, and they don't feel like it should be necessary to pay taxes to other regions to give them their hard-earned money. And there's a legitimacy to that. So we'll see what happens. It's not going to be pretty.
Will it come to a violent civil war? Could it actually?
It's already been violent. So we'll see if it goes past that. People are amped up, and I don't see anybody backing down. Spain's determined to get them under control, and they're determined to break free if they don't back off. And so I don't know. It has the real strong possibility of getting worse before it gets better, and it could turn into civil war. Like I said, there's a real possibility of that. We hope not, but at the same time, we could see a new European nation evolve out of this.
Wow.
Well, Spain, just as far as Catalonia, the region, and it being one of the more affluent, prosperous regions of Spain, it's close to France. It gets a lot of the tourist traffic that just kind of wants to dip into Spain on their way to another country or something like that. This guy sounds.
Have you been there? Because I know you travel.
I have not been to Spain.
I haven't
no.
either. Have you?
Not this area. Huh?
Yeah.
No. But as far as like the European Union goes, and the issues there with your stronger countries and economies like Germany and France and the UK, and a lot of unhappiness there, having to bail out certain countries like the struggles with Ireland or Portugal or Greece. Spain is also, they're not maybe in that category of the weaker economies, the weakest economies, but within Spain, you've got Catalonia as probably the most prosperous area, like we said. Is this a situation where Spain is having economic troubles and they kind of see Catalonia as a cash cow?
Now that I'm looking back and thinking about recent bailouts, since you brought that up, it seems like Spain was on the verge of needing a bailout.
Yeah, I know they were in that
Yeah,
category.
so I don't remember if they actually took one or not, but they've had some financial renegotiations that's had to take place, so restructuring debt and that kind of thing. So maybe.
Her last question is interesting. She says, which stance, that of the Spanish government or to the Catalonians, is a true defense of democracy?
If they commit treason against Spain to break away from their constitutional responsibilities, that I think is a weakened position. Like the
South seceding from the Union.
You signed up for this and you knew what you were getting into. Now, granted, they've been putting extra pressure on them, which makes them angry, but at the same time, legitimate democracies aren't just going to sever without some type of true dialogue first. And I don't know how much that's been going on. It could be. I don't know the story that deeply. But like I said, if it's a democratic process, then everybody needs equal representation. I think they have that, but I don't feel like they think like it's I think it's more of a cultural issue than it is anything else.
Is this an internal Spanish phenomenon, or does this connect at all with nationalism that we've seen globally, Brexit?
Yeah,
is there a thread that connects?
Don't you think that it snowballs? You see one group act that way, referendums here and there, and then that gives you the idea, well, if they can do it, we can do it, and there's no reason for us not to. We can watch the same thing happen. If this happens, even if it doesn't, even if they don't break fully away, even if they don't break fully away, what you might see then, Scotland's considering referendums to break away from the UK, North Ireland's considering referendums to break away from the UK and join in with with Ireland proper. And so this could
Trump
be just
gets
the
reelected in 2020 and California
goes. Yeah, we'll see. Yeah. So but I get the question: is it democratic to want to be independent? Surely, but at the same time, you are part of a functioning system, and you can work yourself out with inside that. Severing ties completely might be. It's anarchistic more than it is democratic, in my opinion.
I'd say that if more towards Montana's first question about comparing it to the 13 colonies breakaway, if the democratic solution, moving forward, whatever happens with them, if they don't feel, and in reality they're not, a fair player at that table, then I don't know. I could possibly sympathize enough with the Catalonians that you could almost make the argument that the 13 colonies, if you compare the taxes that they had on them, if we just look at taxes, I know there was more to it, and it's a different time in history, but just taxes alone compared to what people that actually lived in England were being taxed, the colonists weren't being taxed, as bad. If the Catalonians, I don't know the numbers here, but if the solution to Spain's economic crisis was to use them as a cash cow and maybe higher taxes, I'm not sure what the question is there.
I can see why
the
they're
situation. I could certainly sympathize with that and see why they would have a pretty strong argument for, democracy's not working here.
Dissolution of a union, though, is by definition anti-democratic.
Well, that's what Lincoln said. We actually do this in my class when we talk about the South seceding and their culture depended on that economy. They felt that they were being taken advantage of by the North and all this. Different cultures had developed. Cotton gin's a big part of this in the late 1700s. But they broke away and said, hey, when we declared independence from England, we were a confederacy. We had state sovereignty. This is not what we signed up for. The federal government has been constantly increasing its power. The North growing industry at the expense of the South. So then they break away, obviously. And then Lincoln comes in and says, no Constitution would ever allow for the breakaway, So it's something you can't argue, and I guess that's why we're arguing. So that's a great question.
It's weird to see it come back around, though, and in so many different spots. Like I said, we can throw in the Kurdish movement. You can also talk about the Palestinians trying to get referendums to break away, because Israel claims that territory, and yet is it legal? The way Israel promotes that idea is that the Palestinians are part of Israel, and you have citizenship rights, and all you have to do is pledge your loyalty to the government, and we'll take care of you. And you can vote, and you can do all these things, but until you do, you're blocked. And they're like, no, we're independent, and so they're willing to fight with that. So I don't know. This may drag on for a long time. We may not actually see civil war, but it could just go back and forth and back and forth. Well, I don't know. It'd be interesting to see, though.
What's awesome, too, is this is maybe the first History After Hours episode in 2 years where Trump has not been the first thing
on our list, yeah.
Maybe. I don't know. I want to get to another student question. Emily Talos, she wrote a question, and she wrote several questions, and we could just pick and choose. And some of this we've talked about, North Korea, AI. But let's try this one.
Okay.
And let's limit it just like she did in the question. What future technological devices do you believe will be made in the next 15 years? What do you foresee? You always get this wrong. Remember Back to the Future, flying cars? We still don't have that.
You know what? I was so disappointed when they came out with hoverboards with wheels. That was wrong. I'm sorry, because they were like, kids were like, hoverboards. And then I was like, hoverboards? How does that work? And they go, well, I don't know. Well, there's got these wheels. And I'm like, that is not hovering. That's not a thing. It's a little mini what were those things? The Segways? Yeah, where you ride the thing and roll forward. Yeah. So that's cheating. That's not.
The Back to the Future got it wrong because they thought it would be mechanical improvements. They looked at cars. We'll improve that and we'll make them more like airplanes. Right. They didn't see the software coming. They didn't see the internet.
Next 15 years, technological advancements in space travel, because we will come up with new types of sublight engines that will propel us through the universe at amazing speeds. That's my prediction.
Okay. I think VR is going to continue to trend and become more and more of a part of our lives.
Sounds cool, though.
I mean, have y'all seen that movie with Bruce Willis, Surrogates, where they basically the real person stays tuned in to their surrogate self. There's no threat of disease or anything. If you die, you don't really die, so you can just live out your wildest dreams. Oh. And it kind of changes. That's an extreme example, of course.
I need to see that. I haven't seen that movie.
It's actually an interesting movie, but I don't know. I just looking at where we were 5 years ago with VR compared to what they're doing with Oculus Rift, which our school has one of those now.
So just augmented reality.
Augmented reality in some way. I
hope they do, and this is sort of something I've been predicting since actually 10 years or so ago when I was learning about when they were making flexible screens. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Instead of this big VR helmet, contact lenses that do the same thing. Yeah. And they have contact lenses that have recording devices in them now. And I'm not sure how you control it, but this is a new thing where what you see, it will record video and audio, and it can be downloaded. I guess through Bluetooth. Everything's better with Bluetooth. Get Bluetooth on that, and then you can actually transfer what you're seeing. So that adds a whole new level of, like, if you can record, you can also flip that around, not literally flip it in your eye, but turn that technology around to where you're actually watching some sort of augmented reality as you go through life, which would be an interesting thing from a teaching standpoint, because we could teach from anywhere. If you think about that, like, everybody do this, and you follow this one video lead, and all of a sudden we're walking around in the forum as it was when it was actually functioning as a true thing, or whatever. Like, that would be really kind of cool to go and watch the Olympic Games, or
amazing.
Go and see the Great Wall in China being built, or whatever it is. Like, that would be really pretty cool.
And from a teaching standpoint, that's just incredible. I mean, if
you
even have one student or something put it on, and all the other students can see it, and just almost every lesson you can give them a sense of space and place.
I can foresee a time when you are standing in a classroom where nobody else is there, And yet you're seeing students as if they were there, as sort of a virtual presence, and everybody can interact with everything else.
Virtual schools on the next level.
Yeah, that's cool, right?
Yeah, VR I think is going to be the thing. You know, that's what they say. If VR gets so good and it consumes all of 5 senses, then what's the difference between reality and VR? There would be no actual difference. This is the Matrix, right? I mean,
and the Surrogates movie too. It's basically the same concept. Yeah.
And then of course you could say, well, who's to say we're not in one right now? And then you can go down the multiverse trip, and this is all a simulation. And
Ooh, speaking of multiverse, now this is cool. Just kind of goes along with the stuff you just asked. I saw a report, and I'm not sure like how they're using this yet, but they've developed a new type of. It's a quantum computer. Have you seen this? Instead of using like bits, it uses. I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's like qubits, QU bits, which it's whatever it is. It works at such an amazing speed. They said that the computers that will use quantum computing will make the modern computers look like an abacus. It's that fast. It can compute so, and then it turns into sort of it can teach itself. And
are there people worried that kind of technology is going to create a black hole, though, just destroy us all?
Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, people like Stephen Hawking and Elon Musk, for example, like those guys are like, this is a dangerous thing.
Well, what's the place in Sweden or the
the colloid collider or whatever it's called.
Hadron
Collider.
Because they really had
that
a concern.
was the talk at that time, right? Yeah, of course.
They really had a concern about that.
Particle collisions and whatnot.
Yeah, there would be a black hole that they might actually create one there, and we all die.
All in the name of progress, my boys.
All right. Next topic. In my class we were talking about presidential elections, and I haven't really done this yet because it's the jury's not in yet as far as this last presidential election. But we're all history teachers, and there's been some crazy elections. I just talked about the election of Andrew Jackson and some of that stuff. Mm-hmm. So where do you think, if you had to project where 2016, what makes it a crazy election? Where does it compare to something like 2000, where there's, we didn't even know who was president for a few weeks because of the craziness in Florida.
That was how old were you then? Like what age range were you still on? You were out of school.
Yeah. I was out of high school.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I was 18. That was my first year to vote.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
That was a weird moment because you wake up and you still don't know who's president, and by that time you should clearly know who's president.
How long did it take? It was like weeks, wasn't it?
Oh, over a month. Like it turned into. We crossed over into January before they actually stopped the counting. If I remember
Hanging
that right.
chads. Everybody looking at the ballots.
Yeah, like every day there's some sort of new recount going on, and Florida was the hinge pin, right? So whatever takes place there, whoever won Florida was going to win the election. And then when it boils right down to it, they count and they recount and they recount and they recount, and nobody knows because there's arguments about whether or not this is valid or that's valid. And then the Supreme Court actually got involved and said, okay, stop recounting.
Yeah.
And several districts worth of ballots hadn't been finalized at that moment and officially verified. They were just like, no, it's over. And at that moment, Bush was ahead and he got the presidency. So there's a lot of speculation about whether or not that was the right thing to do.
Boy,
but at the same time, it's been a long time now since the election, and we need some direction. You don't need to be floating around with no.
Yeah, I agree. I was ready for this. Make a decision. Let's get it, because this is very unstable.
Yeah, right.
Because the longer you wait, the more empowered each group will feel.
And I feel it worked out pretty well, regardless. Because first term Bush was good. I felt.
Yeah, I didn't have any trouble with first term Bush. I think he was kind of the person we needed there when everything went down with 9/11.
FTB, first term Bush.
Yeah. But when you think about it, there's not many second termers that was real victory laps. That's what the thing is. Like, your second term is never as good as your first.
But if you talk about it from a democratic process, like, it's ugly. Like, that's ugly because a lot of when you go back and finalize that count unofficially now because it's over, what you realize are that a lot of those districts that were left out of that count when they severed the recount were from Democratic strongholds in Florida, impoverished areas perhaps, with multicultural voters whose voices were not heard in that election, and it swung it. It is what it is.
Election.
Yeah, that was crazy, and it may be the rhetoric in 2016 was outlandish, but as far as the smooth transition afterwards, like it pretty much worked the way it was supposed to. It was ugly and it was heated, and there were things that were thrown out there that had never been said publicly before. I mean, Trump comparing, like, defending the size of his manhood on a stage in a debate. Like, who would have ever thought that you've heard something ridiculous like that?
It was consistently, the bar was lowered, and there was no price to pay. And how many times did we say on this History After Hours podcast, well, that's it for Trump. He can't.
That's
That's going to be the last thing. And he kept coming back like Jason.
Yeah, nothing mattered.
Over and over and over.
Nothing seemed to matter. But again, I don't know that the slapback sort of mentality that we had in that election, I don't think that really compares to the true fear that people had not knowing who was president for more than a month after the election. That, to me, sort of overshadows the nonsense that we saw this last time.
Yeah. Well, the three things that stand out about 2016 is the 17 Republicans, the largest primary field ever.
Sure.
And the last one anybody thought would win won.
Right.
And then the level of conversation at the debates and comparing, and all the nicknames, Crooked Hillary and Little Marco Rubio and Lying Ted, and like we'd never seen that. He made everybody change their game. And then, okay, well, Hillary's going to win in a walk. And we even said the night of the election, it'll probably be a landslide. And then you wake up the next morning.
Yeah, I really thought
I remember looking at my phone because I didn't even stay up the whole time. I just thought, I looked and it said President Trump, and I was just like, what? No. And even now, saying that just a little bit, it's the first president who never had any military or political experience. I mean, it's just. So there's others.
It's strange, but again,
in the modern era, this one in 2000 or.
I still go back to the idea that even though he was unqualified and he took a surprise win, basically, and there's lots of reasons why that and we've talked about that, why it kind of played out the way it did.
Yeah.
But at the same time, when it was done, it was done.
Yeah.
And they still go back and forth about, well, Hillary this and that, and we talk about the Russian stuff and whatever. It's done, but it's done, and he became president, and it was regardless of what you think about the man, the process itself worked. The Electoral College worked.
There was no debating in this one like there was in 2000. But what do you think about? It's been a year, right, since the election, nearly about 51 weeks or something. But I can't recall, or do I even know of, any time before me that the year after the election was still so heated.
Oh yeah.
I mean, back
we're
in
still
2000,
talking about Hillary.
Well,
right.
I mean, that never happened.
There was, look at the media, how it's
2000
still engaged. It feels like they're in election year mode still.
2000, there was a lot of controversy because a lot of people were like, "Oh, we reject Bush, and it should have been."
You think it was 9/11? A year later, before the nation kind of congealed and kind of set that aside.
Probably, yeah, because you deal with that in your first term.
I guess because I was younger, I didn't catch the whole thing once Bush was elected. That there were still Gore people, chanting.
Oh no, there were there were massive problems. Especially in states that were dedicated to him in Democratic strongholds. They're like, no, you stole the election. It was bitter. Yeah. It really was. And so there were demands to go above the Supreme Court and to redo the recounting, even though the fact that they had said no, that's that. Lawsuits were filed. I mean, it was pretty contentious. But then your point is 9/11, and we all go, okay, that's it. Rally.
Let's come together. Mm-hmm. What if this past election had gone down like 2000, and Trump comes out on top in a very a contentious election like that?
Well, to be honest, before the election, I was scared it would play out like everybody thought. Hillary would be president, and then there would be the Trump people I thought would have been the aggressors. I really thought it might come to violence. We've had a peaceful transfer of power ever since forever.
Weren't there reports where people were saying if he doesn't win, because they had been taught so often that it was a rigged election, that if he didn't win, that they would actually create violence in the streets?
Well, that's what we heard with is because he kept saying the election's rigged. This is all rigged. He kept saying that. If you remember the months leading up to the election, he had his people. If he doesn't get elected, and I was just thinking, I hope that doesn't happen.
He had almost conceded defeat a few weeks before,
right.
But still with that whole,
it's rigged.
It's rigged. Putting that out there, and then
that was a dangerous thing. And then he became president, and it all just kind of fizzled out. Now, of course, there were protests, and obviously in the streets, and there was some violence, and and things. But I thought, Obama did what every other president's done, showed class, invites him in.
Sure. What else? What other election can you think of? Because you teach U.S. history. What other one could you say?
I know
was
them
like
all.
nasty?
So,
All right.
I mean, there was a lot of mudslinging in 1828, Jackson against John Quincy Adams. Nobody knows about that probably. There's been some ties where it's gone to the House of Representatives, like when Jefferson and Burr tied, they voted 36 times in a row. I mean, that's one of those that, but they were both the same political ideology, and the incumbent John Adams finished third. But here's one nobody talks about. Lincoln's re-election in 1864. And it's important because only the North got to vote. It's also important because most people in Congress and other Northerners was like encouraging Lincoln, just pass an executive order, we're at war, don't have the election. And Lincoln could have done that and probably would have been justified in doing that. And imagine that. If he would have set a precedent that at a time of war, we don't have a presidential election. The president stays the president through the time of war. But he said, look, and I'm paraphrasing, he says basically, what are we fighting for if the people can't, if they want to replace me? And it actually was close for a while with a guy named General McClellan. But and people don't think about that, and maybe I do because I'm a U.S. teacher, but what if Lincoln had said, we're not going to have an election right now?
Can you imagine the horror that would, because every president would then create a system of warfare just to stay in power? Oh, we can't have a vote. Sorry.
Yeah,
Because we've had a half years since I got voted in. Oh, time to stir up some trouble.
Yeah.
All right, here's a conspiracy theory for you, because that's just fun. Do you think about when you said the thing about 9/11 a while ago, and everybody rallies around Bush? Do you think that Trump, because of some of the controversy about what he said and whether or not he was really fit for leadership or whatever, do you think that he's actually trying to create war somewhere that's really sort of dramatic, so that he can say, "Well, you got to rally behind me because we're at war"? Like the whole thing with North Korea and this really pressing on that, or threatening to invade Venezuela. I mean, do you think there's something behind that?
Well, it's scary.
Because you do have half the country that's like, I don't know. Even still, they're, I don't know. Like, dude is on the edge of insanity, perhaps. But if you had a rallying moment, then all of that would shush if you had some sort of crisis. I mean, I wonder. I mean, see, it's almost, you can interpret it that way. I don't think that's true, but I'm just saying you could interpret
Generally
it that way.
speaking.
Absolutely. I could see a scenario that plays out exactly like that, in the next
It's crafty.
few years.
Oh, it happens. Anytime, like if your country is seen as the victim of something and they have to attack back, there's going to be that moment. And his approval ratings will go up. This is when he bombed, bombing in Syria? When he sent the Tomahawk missiles. Everybody, even left-wingers on the news was like, Trump has just became president. Even they were like,
Right,
good
sure.
for him for doing this.
Yeah,
I remember.
Yeah, he sounds so presidential all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember.
What's that? Zacharias, Fareed Zakaria.
Fareed, yeah.
He's one of the ones that, yes, now he has become president today. And I was just thinking, wow, if he's saying that as a left liberal, well, man.
He became president that day, but he turned back into himself the next day.
Oh yeah, well, late that night, as he tweets an insult to someone.
And kind of a reverse of all that, if you look at our second president, John Adams, one-term president, at the end of his term, most people in his party, they wanted to go to war with France. The alliance with France and the revolution that had kind of fizzled because we hadn't helped them with Britain. And at that point,
XYZ affair, we were justified in going.
the Federalists were like, come on, if you do this, you will get a second term. And his main thing was to keep us neutral and keep us out of it.
Yeah.
And
They
what
bribed.
happened?
Sort of cost him. Yeah.
What's
Probably
funny
cost
is
him.
like he never gets credit for this, but he sent diplomats that got bribed. They came back, the huge insult. Hamilton is designing, uniforms for the military. He's going to have George Washington in name only as the commander, but he's going to lead them into the field. So all the Federalists are getting, and John Adams sends another diplomatic team. But fortunately, Napoleon had kind of taken over and said, it's just a spat between family.
Yeah.
But had John Adams declared war, he would have got reelected, had the support of the Federalists, but he chose peace. Man, he never gets props.
Would
Maybe
that-
we
would
wouldn't
that
have gotten Louisiana Territory.
Would that have prevented
Oh, yeah.
Jefferson then?
It would
Do you think he would have ever been president?
That's a good question. Would Jefferson that could have really hurt the Democrat Republicans? Yeah, I don't know. We could talk about these elections forever.
Yeah, I love the what ifs of history.
Yeah. And of course, FDR running for a third term during the war, stuff like that. 1912 and Teddy Roosevelt's Bull Moose Party. I mean, we could go on. But I was thinking, my class has asked me before, and I've said this, what are your major qualifications, that you look at as a president? And I've said this just about every year for 5-6 years. I don't know what ranking I put these. Intellectual curiosity. I want a president that if I don't know, I will get an expert and find out. That kind of president. Calmness. You don't want a reactionary president, generally speaking. That's my top two, probably. There was a third one.
Do you think military experience is a necessity?
No, I don't think so. Not if you have intellectual curiosity and you'll surround yourself with military experts.
Sure.
And I also like a president that can change or take the blame. Like JFK did after the Bay of Pigs. Somebody that's, okay, that was my fault. We've adjusted. Not somebody that consistently tries to find scapegoats. And all that left my mouth. And then I realized that's the exact opposite of Trump. And that doesn't mean that I don't think something really good could come out of his presidency or that he, but, I don't see him as intellectually curious. He already knows all. I mean, he's never admitted that he has been wrong ever. Not once, right? That's kind of just different right there. And calm, that's not what I would use to describe him. Now, it could all be a show and he's a mastermind underneath and he knows. I mean, that's definitely something that people have argued. But of the past presidents, and let's just push Trump aside, what are some qualities that you think behooves a president? I guess it depends on the era as well. Because, they were going to rip Jackson off the 20 for various reasons, maybe. I mean, this is the guy that...
He was exceedingly popular during his time, though, wasn't he?
Very popular. Won in a landslide in 28 and won again in 32. And the age of Jackson, the only time period named for a president. And by the way, he changed the game because after every president had to try to relate to the common man. I mean, the next president, well, besides Van Buren, the next one was Harrison. He's like, I was born in a log cabin, and I'm just like Jackson, which he was rich. Think about it. Every president since Jackson has got to appeal to the working man, no matter. I mean, Trump's a billionaire, but in order to get elected, you've got to convince the working class Americans that I'm speaking for you.
And it was Jackson's era that the landowning requirement was done away with. So.
Yeah, and that's the common man. Jefferson and Hamilton, neither one foresaw that, having to appeal to the masses and campaign slogans, trying to attract just your average American. Yeah, and that changed the game for that. So, I mean, because you could think about a lot of qualities, speaking ability and, relating to the public. Clinton, the big thing with him was when he talked to you, it made you feel like you were the only person in the world.
That's
and
right.
Shake your hand. He was a big, what do they call it, a glad hander, and slap your back. And, there's politicians like that.
I don't necessarily need a showman. What I need is somebody who has integrity, intelligence, and willingness to listen to people who are experts in their field, and like you said, surround yourself with good people who will give you good advice, and then you listen to that advice. And if something doesn't go well, step up and say, that didn't go well, and that's on me and my team, and we'll get that fixed. Like, just the idea that nobody's gonna be perfect, and to suggest that you are all the time is just, it's ridiculous. And that's not a sign of a good leader. Good leaders listen to their people. They monitor and adjust. So we have to do in the classroom every single day. What's going on at this moment? How do we help the most people? Like, that's what I'm looking for in a leader. Someone who is determined, but at the same time cognizant of people's condition, willing to reach out to as many people as they possibly can to lift them up, even if it's just give me some time and part of your attention. I need that from you, if nothing else. Just to feel that my voice has been heard and it matters to you, and then you go off and do what you can to help. You may not be able to solve every problem, but the idea that you are aware that there are other people's problems and that your job it's not about you. You're serving a population. You're serving as leader. And I said those exact words in class today. Someone who serves as leader. I am your first servant. I'm not the first citizen. I'm not the primary example of what's best in our thing, but I'm a solid person who cares about the country and cares about the people and wants to drive this forward with some sort of sense of stability and unity and positivity. That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
So who epitomizes that? I really liked Reagan. I really did.
Reagan was a great communicator, too. I mean,
Wasn't that his nickname?
Yeah.
Was it?
Oh,
Yeah, it was, yeah.
I don't know. Well, I didn't know, but it fits him. And that's something I was going to say. Just in general, good communication, and somebody who is makes themselves present enough to be seen, like you said. The first servant for everybody, not just the extreme of any one side, because also, like you said, you're not going to be right 100% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
I like somebody who, whether they're Republican, Democrat, whichever way they lean, they recognize the value in other people's opinions and other people's perspectives, and they can come back to the middle when they need to.
Sure.
So
and Reagan wasn't perfect, and I don't think there's a historian out there that would say that he was, but you can see that he's aware of his shortcomings and he wants to try to do better. And I legitimately think that he served his country as best he knew how.
Yeah,
and you got to admire that.
His stories too. If you haven't done this, YouTube, Reagan telling stories. He had some of the funniest and great, just little tales. I remember when after he got shot, and he went to the hospital. And he told somebody, he goes, I woke up and saw all those doctors around me. He goes, I just hope they were all Republican. He was self-deprecating in a way, because people, at the end, towards the end, they said he fell asleep in cabinet meetings, and he wasn't really engaged. And he's
fighting Parkinson's.
Yeah, he showed somebody. He said, I don't sleep in all the cabinet meetings. Sometimes I do this. And he drew a doodle. Just he was able to roll with the punches. I think people really related to that.
Yeah,
that is something that's pretty good.
Being always on the defense is just, I think that's problematic because it shows you're humorless and you have, like I said, your hubris is going to show and it will get at the best of you eventually. That's the idea behind it. Like you can't just be, I'm 100% right 100% of the time. Screw you if you don't believe that. Yeah. It doesn't work. And I hope for our sake that this president gets that figured out before it's all said and done. Yeah, we'll all be better off if he does.
Yeah, for real. Okay, I know we were all over the map on this podcast. There's one more place I want to go, and this is just for Mr. Lee for joining us today. We've been trying to get him a part of the podcast for 6 years now.
Long time.
6 years, and
the 3-year long time podcast.
Well, we'll just say 6 years. Sounds better.
And thanks for having me.
It's so hard to get him. His time is very precious, and we do appreciate that. I do have a question. Here we go. Halloween is coming. We talked about this last time. Mm-hmm. What was your favorite Halloween costume that you ever wore ever? And that might have been yesterday. I don't know. And number 2, scariest movie you ever saw?
Right.
Ooh, wow. Good questions. I am a fan of zombie costumes, and more recently, before we moved, we used to live over here in a neighborhood that gets trick-or-treaters all the time. I mean, not all the time, but one night a year, but a massive amount of trick-or-treaters.
It's a crazy area. Every night.
Very strange.
Summer solstice trick-or-treat.
Maybe one of the most popular areas.
Just keep giving out candy every day.
It's very strange. But we would have little get-togethers, and our friends would come over, and we would kind of do like a zombie yard. So, my goal was to almost scare kids from coming into the yard to get candy. If they made it there to get candy, that was great. And I was one of the zombies, and my wife would decorate me with the skin coming off, the latex skin, and get it all going. And we'd have 3 or 4 people just kind of lurking around the yard, and we'd spot the kids, and we'd go after them. And there were some tears, but for the most part, kids got candy. So I don't know. I'd have to go.
Some tears, but they got candy for the most. We scared a few of them all the time.
Scariest movie? Wow.
You can go from when you were a kid too. That's what we did.
Yeah, let's see.
Some of them don't hold up.
I remember one that absolutely terrified me, and I think it was Poltergeist.
I remember Poltergeist.
Yeah, was that the one where the little girl had her hand on the TV?
Yeah.
And that creepy little woman that would say, "Hattie Ann, come away from the light," or whatever her name was. That movie terrified me, and it.
It seems to be around. If you're anywhere between 25 and 45, it seems to be.
Have you seen the new one?
Yes.
Saw it.
What do you think?
I liked it.
I liked it too. And did y'all know it was the highest grossing horror film at the theaters of all time?
Really?
It was.
I guess because
of so well
popularity
done.
of the earlier. It really is.
I'm ready for the sequel. Because they got
They're
it
gonna
set
have
up.
There's another one coming. Yeah. So in the one that was in the earlier version of that with Tim Curry, they did flashbacks, right? There's the young kids, but here's the older people thinking back about what had happened. So the new one that they're going to do now is the older folks. So they separated it out instead of flashing back.
Okay.
They do it, yeah.
Nice. I'll be honest. The earlier one, I was young enough that it just scared the bejesus out of me, and I never saw the whole thing. I need to rewatch that one.
What was the guy that played the clown?
Tim Curry.
Tim Curry. Yeah. Okay. So and this new guy took a brand new take on it, but it was right for this modern.
Oh, it was great.
Because I think if you went back to the other one, it wouldn't be.
It was creepy, dude.
It was creepy, though.
Yeah, I liked it.
Oh, they all float. Good grief. All right, well, be safe. Don't be that awkward kid that's too old to go door to door to trick or treat. And
Did y'all talk about that last week or
Yeah,
recently?
how old is too old to trick or
What
treat?
did y'all come up with?
I'm thinking by the time you are
33, 34, I think somewhere in there.
If you're shaving, in my opinion, if you're shaving, you need to stop.
Now, I think
Go
that
ahead.
there's that,
Now,
like,
you want to
13
take your kids around. You want to take your little brothers and sisters or whatever. Like that's different. But if you're actually going door to door yourself with a bag out, come on now, like that. It just become a system of
Trick or
begging at this
treat.
point, yeah.
You gotta.
Nah,
Be the
but
guy with the little mannequin kid. With the hand
go to somebody's house and have a party. That's what you need to do. Let the kids get out there and run around.
Yeah.
There you go.
You're stealing candy from babies.
All right, that concludes this episode of History After Hours. You can see us on YouTube and Facebook and Twitter and SoundCloud, and share it, please, to let everybody know. Students, please write in some more questions. And if you want to be part of the podcast, let us know. We will see you later. Goodbye.